The Big Blue Thing on the Hill by Yuval Zommer. Far away from the city in the middle of the great forest was a special place called Howling Hill. During the day it was peaceful and quiet because all the animals were asleep. Snooze. But at night the forest really came alive. Out came the foxes and the weasels. Out came the boars and the badgers. The bears lumbered out of their lairs to practice their growling, and the wolves crept out of their dens to practice their howling. All was well in the great forest at the foot of the Howling Hill until one night when something terrible happened. First there was a rumble, then there was a roar, and finally a terrifying sight appeared right on top of the Howling Hill. "It's a meteorite," said the bears. "It's a spaceship," said the wolves. "It's trouble," said the foxes, and the foxes were right. So they all went to hide in the great forest, hoping that the trouble would soon be gone. Early the next morning, the animals crept back to the foot of the Howling Hill, but the trouble was still there. "It's a big blue elephant," said the weasels, who had never seen an elephant before. "It's a big blue dinosaur," said the badgers, equally bird-brained. "It's a big blue thing," said the foxes, who were right again, and everyone agreed that it seemed to be awake and should probably be left alone until it fell asleep. "Perhaps we can frighten it away," suggested the wolves when the animals returned at dusk. They waited for the moon to come up, and then they howled and howled and howled at the big blue thing, but it did not move even 1 inch. "Let us try," suggested the bears, so they growled and growled and growled at the big blue thing, but it still did not move even 1 inch. Frogs. "Perhaps we could nudge it back down the hill," suggested the boars. They huffed and they puffed and they pushed and they shoved with all their might, but the big blue thing still didn't move, not even the tiniest bit. "How about burying it?" suggested the foxes. So the foxes, the badgers, and the weasels gathered around, and they dug and dug and dug some more. But just as it looked as though their plan might work, the big blue thing made a grumbling, rumbling noise. "It's waking up!" shouted the animals, and they all fled back to the safety of the great forest. No one knew what to do next, so they called a general forest meeting to ask the wise owls what to do about the problem of the big blue thing. After some hoots and toots and rather loud whoops, the wisest old owl announced a most clever plan. The wisest old owl explained, "First, we summon the help of our smallest forest friends, the bees and the wasps, midges and skeeters, and we ask them to form a big bug flying squad. We could invite a snake or two along for good measure, too. Then we wait until dawn. When the big blue thing starts to wake up, the squad must go inside the mouth of the beast, where they must whiz and buzz and buzz and whiz, and if necessary, nip and sting. Then it won't be long before that big blue thing is gone for good." So as the sun peeked over the top of the Howling Hill, a big black cloud of the forest's finest bugs, and a snake or two for good measure, were ready to zoom in. They whizzed and buzzed and as they flew and crawled through every crack right inside the big blue thing. It didn't take long before it was clear that the wisest old owl had been right. With a roar and a rumble, the big blue thing turned tail and fled back down the Howling Hill and away to wherever it had come from. "Ouch! Ah! Yelp!" Growl. And all the while the animals screeched and growled and roared and howled, snuffed and huffed, and generally made such a hullabaloo that it was heard for miles and miles. After that, things got back to normal in the great forest at the foot of the Howling Hill, and every day was more peaceful and quiet once more, until one fine night. There's another blue thing. Look,